Hi folks, it's David O here in Karmi'EL on a warm June 15th, coming to the longest or latest Shabbos of the year. This year it is Shabbos KORACH. I'm going to come back to it in a second, but I've been wanting to say something for really almost 6 months, and I keep forgetting, and I want to take a moment to do it now. We find ourselves at KosherTube in a difficult situation. I think most of you are aware that Google and YouTube, Facebook have put in different forms of monitoring censorship to prevent, they would say, dangerous content from reaching the internet. They do it by putting in algorithms which look for certain content to either censor it completely or make it inappropriate in some way to larger audiences. In our case, we have over 18,000 videos on the site. About 12,000 of them are public, and about 800 of them have been marked in a discriminatory way to make them less appealing or less financially beneficial to a broader audience. Now, if we were engaged in some kind of extremism, I would understand it. But some of the things that are marked are cantorial things, children's programming, women's programming, a lot of Gomorrah, very little political stuff. I understand, anything that we ever ran that was on the Holocaust has been marked because they say it's inappropriate. Somehow things that are violently anti-Semitic get through these algorithms, and I don't know how on other channels. It's not for me to say. I would want to also add that there's an appeal process for this, and we appeal every video that is so designated by YouTube, and we have never lost an appeal. That is, when we ask somebody to go and look at the video that they have marked as inappropriate, and they go look at it, which sometimes takes 6 months, they then agree with us that it was marked inappropriately, but during that time, the video had a black mark. So it is really a chilling process that even though we win all of our appeals, they continue to mark similar videos again, and we have to appeal it again. And we're not a large corporation with big lawyers and things like that. It's a tremendous amount of work that's being done to try to get not just justice, but it verges really on quite stupid, in fact, what's going on here. But we're subject to it, and they're our platform, and there's not much we can do but keep trudging on. How do we fight back? Well, we fight back by, number one, forcing them to justify every such movement they've made. Now, this has been going on for less than a year, by the way, but it goes on week after week after week. I think there's 900 videos right now that are being reviewed and will all eventually be approved. The other way we fight back is through you. Because the impact of what they're doing is to limit our reach, we need to find other ways to expand our reach. And so I've asked in text on our weekly videos that you share them and like them. And hopefully they become more popular, and that ameliorates the damage that the platform is doing to us. So I want to thank those people, and I know who you are. I don't know if you want to be public, so I'm not mentioning your names, but I really do thank each one of you who like the videos, who share the videos, either these from Karmiel or anything on KosherTube. It's very, very important, very, very valuable, and frankly, very inexpensive for you to do it, and it helps us a great deal. So anybody out there who likes and shares our material, we are deeply in your debt for doing it. It's very, very helpful. And those of you who just take the time to enjoy it and learn from it, that's good as well. I won't bore you any further with that, but I did need to say thank you and to explain why it is that we're making this push and will continue to, as long as we're under the gun here. I feel like we've been selected, but I don't think we are. I think anybody who is, putting out Jewish stuff or stuff connected to Israel or, historical stuff may be a victim of this. We certainly are. So thank you. You may be the cure that was sent to us before the disease arrived. Let's talk a little bit about Korach. It's just to mention, it's a beautiful, another sunny day here in Karmi'EL. Temperature is around 29 degrees, which is in the 90s for you. It's quite dry today, and it looks like it's going to be a lovely Shabbos. Maybe not so much for the Levium who are watching. This is not a happy Parsha for the Levium, sadly. We're right now coming in. We're into this slide downhill in the Torah. It began when people started to complain about the manna, that the manna really wanted meat, and the manna didn't give them satisfaction. And then Miriam complained about how Moshe was relating to his wife, and then the spies came back from their mission to Israel, and what did they say? They said, it's a great country, great land, but we are grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we're not going to be able to conquer it. And more than that, the land kills its own people. So they went from being 2 weeks away from entering the land of Israel and beginning to conquer it to 40 years, the famous 40 years in the desert, in which they died. That generation passed away. They said they weren't able to enter the land. God said, well, you won't then. I will keep my promise, but not to you. I will keep my promise to your children. There was a Sabbath desecration, and now maybe we've reached the bottom of the pit, so to speak. And that is the rebellion of the violent rebellion against Aaron and Moshe by Korach. Korach was considered to be the wealthiest man in the Midbar. There is a Egyptian story told of a Semite who suddenly disappeared overnight in Egypt, and he took with him Pharaoh's treasury. This may very well have been Korach himself. The most expensive thing that you could own in ancient times was itself techelet. Techelet, the blue dye of the talus, was so valuable that it was always more valuable per ounce than gold itself. Korach was so wealthy that he dressed his followers in garments made entirely of techeles. He was a Levite. He was a great man in his own time, a great speaker, demagogue, in fact. And he was driven by a desire for kavod, a desire for honor. And clearly the desire for honor is something that blinds a person terribly. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was, I think, arguably the most honored man in the history of the world, did not pursue honor. When Korach said to him, "What have you done? You've given Aaron the role of high priest. You've given your another relative the role of the head of the tribe of Levi. You've given yourself the role of king and prophet. No matter. It's too much. The Jews are all holy people." Right? And he put together a series of questions for Moses, proving that in his mind, if everything is the same, there's no reason to raise one above the other. If a room is filled with Torahs, do you really need a mezuzah on the door? If a talus is made entirely techeles, do you need a techeles string, etc.? And in fact, the answers to those questions was yes, you do. But not yes you do because you're short of Techeles or you're short of Torah. Yes you do because God instructed us to, directly. There's an idea of science, there's an idea of logic, there's an idea of something beyond science and logic, and that is the Word of God. Just checking if the numbers are working. So it is here. The reason why we put a blue string on our tallis is because God instructed us to. The reason why Moshe Rabbeinu assumed the positions he assumed was because God instructed him to. The reason he appointed Aaron to his position is because God instructed him to. So if Korach had a complaint, it wasn't with Moshe and Aaron. It was with God himself. And it was Moshe who suggested that Aaron create a test for Korach that would determine whether or not these were Moshe's plans and ideas or God's himself. And it turned out to be a capital plan, to say the least. The people who joined Korach were all people who were bitten by the venom of envy. Korach himself, very close to Moshe Rabbeinu, the same generation, leader of Levites. The Reubenites were the children of Reuben, who was the firstborn of the 12 tribes, but not the most honored of the 12 tribes, and always felt that they should be. They joined. Right? Dasan and Aviram, two of the taskmasters who suffered tremendously in Egypt and always envied and hated Moshe. 250 nobles, 250 of the leaders of the people, the notables of the people, joined it. In the end, they were all destroyed, one way or the other. And the nation suffered as a result of this test as well. But it was a necessity. Now, who were they protecting, these tests, right? Were they protecting the honor and the covet of Moshe Rabbeinu? I think he didn't have that desire. Remember a few chapters back, when when Joshua came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, you've selected 70 elders to pass on learning to, but in our camp, Eldad and Medad are themselves prophesizing. You have to do something about it. You can't let this continue. And Moshe Rabbeinu's reaction was very telling. He said, would that everybody in the camp was a prophet and could prophet. He didn't want to hold it for himself. He wanted the glory of God's knowledge to be invested in every member of the camp. Let's jump ahead. Moshe had 2 sons, and eventually somebody had to become the leader. Moshe was going to hit 120. He wasn't going to enter the land, we found out, and he had to pass on the leadership. It would have been natural for him to want to pass on the leadership to one or both of his sons. And yet, God said, no. Invest Joshua, your student, who never left your side, never left your tent, right, with some of your glory, and to lay your hands on him. Right? By laying your hands on him, you're passing your authority to him. And by sharing some of your glory, you're sharing with him the influence that you yourself, Moshe Rabbeinu, had. Moshe doesn't argue it. He says, if that's how it is to be, that is how it is to be. And he moves forward doing it in a public and really beautiful fashion. Moshe didn't protect his own covet, his own honor. He did the work that he was required to do by God. A position he actually resisted, we know. and yet he fulfilled as nobody else could. Many years ago, when I was a journalist and a documentary filmmaker, I made a film about the war between the former Soviet Union and the Afghan Mujahideen. I learned a great deal during that time, but one of the most significant lessons I learned from one of the senior leaders of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan was something that is understood to be true by virtually all military leaders. A military leader learns more from defeat than he does from victory. In a victory, he refights the same war the next time around, because it worked. In defeat, he needs to learn how to fight differently, to fight for the environment that now exists, not the former one. So generally speaking, it's a much better learning experience to lose a war than to win one, for a military strategist. I'm telling you this because it applies to the sections we find ourselves in the Torah right now. The Torah is famous as a book of faith and a book of religion as being about a book about the failure of the greats. You know, that we don't have an Abraham or a Moshe, Yaakov, Yitzchak, who is without error. I'm not talking about just sin, but without significant error. We see dysfunctional families, we see dysfunctional political systems. Why? Well, I would say the first reason is because they happened. And the Torah doesn't want to hide this from us. And I would say secondly, and of equal importance, maybe more so, is that they are lessons for us. We do not have to make the same mistakes that those who came before us made, even though we are lowly and we are not of the majesty of a Moses or a Joshua, Aaron. And yet, we have the experience of their mistakes to learn from and to avoid. So, as we look at the Parsha and wonder, what is it for us today? I think its lessons are multiple, both on a personal level, a family level, certainly on a political level, with all that's going on around us today. We need to learn that humility is a much better teacher than arrogance. That arrogance often blinds the individual from the lessons that will cause him to succeed. So as we enter the Shabbos of Korach, let us all have in mind that our strength is in our humility. Our strength is in our ability to see around us and learn what we can do better ourselves. Take advantage of that. Don't make the mistakes of Korach. Learn from the sons of Korach, who wrote Tehillim and who rejoined the community long after their father was deep underground crying out. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos, and a good week coming up. David Ostriker in Karmi'EL.